Hey, good evening, everyone, or good morning, or afternoon, depending on your time zone. We'll be starting momentarily. Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, hello everyone. This evening I want to start a new series. I'm going to be talking about the Visuddhimagga. This is a very foundational text for the Theravada tradition. It's not an easy text to approach, so it may help and encourage people to tackle it, to have a bit of background and overview. Today I want to talk mostly about the author, Buddhaghosa, a very important figure in Theravada Buddhism, a foundational figure, I would say. He lived in the 5th century AD, and he did his principal work in Sri Lanka during the reign of King Mahanama in the first decades of that century. So this is about 1,000 years after the Buddha's time. Buddhaghosa was a Brahmin born in North India, and before he converted to Buddhism, he was a learned expert in the Vedas. So we can see already that he had a very scholarly, erudite mind. And we can see from his works, particularly from the Visuddhimagga itself, we can see that he had a very comprehensive grasp of detail. The Visuddhimagga is not the only important work that he did. He also composed the Atthakathas, the commentaries. It appears that the Visuddhimagga was written first because the commentaries sometimes refer back to the Visuddhimagga. So the condition of Buddhist learning at the time was that the old, what are called the old commentaries, were already pretty much lost, and it's believed that in the generation or two after the Buddha, his beginning with Sariputta and others of his immediate disciples, and then following on to the next generation or two, commentaries were written detailing explanations for points that were obscure in the suttas themselves. Buddhaghosa spent some time in India looking for these commentaries and could not find a complete collection anywhere. And eventually he ended up in Sri Lanka at the Mahavihara. The Mahavihara was a big important monastery in Sri Lanka, and it is really the seed monastery for the entire Theravada tradition today. It looks to be very likely that any Theravada bhikkhu currently, whether they're in Thailand, Burma, or in the West, can trace their lineage eventually back to the Mahavihara. It was that important as a central seed for the Theravada tradition. They had a rival monastery, the Abhayagiri monastery, that was known to be more, let's say, eclectic in its approach and incorporated some Mahayana tendencies. And these are the two rival monasteries, and depending mostly on the favor of the king at the time, one or the other would be favored. Eventually, the Mahavihara monastery won out and became established as the central monastery for the tradition. Now, when Buddhaghosa got to Mahavihara, he found that they had a collection of the commentaries, but only in Sinhalese translation. They had lost the original Pali many centuries before, and only a Sinhalese version remained. So he asked the elders for permission to have access to all their library, and he wanted to translate back the Sinhalese commentaries into Pali, because Pali was a more universal language amongst Buddhists than Sinhalese, which is a local language of Sri Lanka only. They set him a test for him. They wanted him first to write a treatise explaining his understanding of Dhamma, to make sure he was of an orthodox view before they would let him do the translation. And this is the origin of the Visuddhimagga, which, amongst other things, is a encyclopedic overview of all the Dhamma, of all the teachings of the Buddha, including the Abhidhamma. Now, legend has it that after he wrote the manuscript, before he could present it to the elders, mischievous Dewa, in one version it's said to be Saka himself, hid the manuscript so that Buddhaghosa had to rewrite it from scratch. And this happened again a second time, and then all three versions were revealed. And to the astonishment of the Sangha at the Mahavihara, when the versions were compared, they agreed down to the last syllable. So even if we don't want to take this flourish in the story literally, it does point out the very high regard that the tradition has for this work, for the Visuddhimagga. They wouldn't come up with a magical, legendary origin story if it was just another run-of-the-mill book. After completing the Visuddhimagga, Buddhaghosa then undertook the task of translating the Atthakatthas from Sinhalese into Pali. So the commentaries as we have them now are mostly the work of Buddhaghosa. There was a few added later, but the great bulk of the commentaries are the work of Buddhaghosa. But they are based on translations from Sinhalese. Now, it's of course not possible for us to determine at this date how closely the translation followed the original old commentaries, but from what we can gather from Buddhaghosa's approach, he seemed to be his um, emphasis was always on uh, holding close to the traditional teachings and views. So it was unlikely that he invented too much of importance. Uh, uh, it's the Adhikatas are really an astonishing work for one man, and he may have had help in doing it. He may have had assistants who did parts of it, but it's still impressive. Going through the entire Sutta Pitaka and including commentaries on the Vinaya and on some of the Abhidhamma books. The commentaries are a very useful guide presently for translators. If there are phrases, words, or bits and pieces that are difficult to understand because the words are obscure and we're working with an ancient language, that the commentaries will often have a rephrasing. As part of the commentaries is to go through the suttas almost line by line and explain the words and clarify any dubious points. Commentaries also include extensive stories. There's a wealth of stories found in the commentaries and the Adhikatas. For example, if a character is named in a sutta and there's very little more told about him, see, the Buddha was addressing so and so, and then the commentary then may give a life story of this fellow, and often including previous lifetimes. So there's quite a wealth of stories in the Adhikatas. And it's said that nowadays the old Sinhalese commentaries that Buddhaghosa worked from are now gone, and one story says they were deliberately destroyed after they were burned in a bonfire at the monastery after Buddhaghosa finished his work, because they said we don't need these anymore. Be that as it may, we don't have the original Sinhalese, which themselves were translated from older works. So Buddhaghosa's Adhikata is like a third generation, translated from Pali to Sinhalese and back to Pali. The Visuddhimagga has become a core text of the Theravada tradition, almost a defining text. And any sort of doctrinal issues that are discussed or decided, any controverted points, in most Theravada countries, this Visuddhimagga's position is accepted as authoritative. It's given a very high degree of respect, and it's studied widely. Now we have now an English translation. This is it here, the Path of Purification, translated by Nyanamoli. It's been published and republished in different versions. You won't always see that same cover, but it's translated as Path of Purification. And it's also, I found, available as an online book. One can find it easily online if you want. The translation itself was another great work of scholarship, to be able to translate the Visuddhimagga, because the Pali is not always the easiest in this book. and it gets very technical in places. Nyanamoli was a Western monk who lived lived and worked in Sri Lanka. He was born in England, and I'm just looking at his biography at the back of the book. And his work of the translation of the Visuddhimagga, called The Path of Purification, was first published in 1956. It's a very good translation. It's a very clear English, quite readable as far as is possible to make such a very dense technical work, doctrinal work, accessible. Nyanamoli's done a very good job. Highly recommended. I believe it's the only English translation. It stood the test of time. Of course, it's been translated into other languages as well. I've seen a German version, and it's been translated into the Asian languages, of course. So it's very, very widespread in the Theravada world. It's probably given respect and authority second only to the suttas themselves. So that's really all I want to say this time as an introduction. Next week, I want to get into an overview of the structure of the Visuddhimagga and the critical apparatus and how to access it. The indexes and so on. So I'll leave it there for now. It's pretty brief, but I'll take questions now for a while. Let's see what we got here. It looks like there's a couple of questions up already. I remember in one of your old videos you said a story about Sariputta jumping over a pond of mud, and the Buddha said not to mind because Sariputta was a monkey for 500 lifetimes. May I know the source of this story? I don't remember exactly the source, but I think it was a Dhammapada commentary. It's certainly a commentary story, but I can't remember which one. Does the Arahant gain as much knowledge as the Buddha? Does he get to know the entire forest, only a handful of leaves, or something in between? No, nobody has as much knowledge as the Buddha. The knowledge gained by an Arahant is variable. Not all Arahants will have the same penetration of psychic powers and memory of past lives and so on, but is always less than the Buddha. But what's the same between a Buddha and an Arahant is their realization of Nibbana. There's no difference there. Do you have any thoughts on the relative value of Visuddhimagga compared to Visuddhimagga? The Visuddhimagga was a parallel text covering much the same ground, written at the Abhayagiri monastery, the rival monastery to the Mahavihara. Which one was written first, we don't really know. It's not really certain. As far as I know, neither work refers to the other one at all, even to argue with it. So I have no idea which one was written first. I don't think anybody really does. Unfortunately, the Visuddhimagga written in Pali, the original Pali is lost, and we have it only in Chinese translation. And so reading the English translation from the Chinese from the Pali is often can be when you once you translate through two languages, especially languages as different as Indo-European languages like Pali or English and Chinese, there's always some distortion. Visuddhimagga is a shorter book, and it doesn't have anecdotes and stories like we'll find here and there in the Visuddhimagga. It does have a different approach to meditation, and this is, I think, an interesting topic. I'll probably get back onto it when we're dealing with the chapters on jhana meditation in the Visuddhimagga. But the Visuddhimagga takes a quite different approach to particularly breath meditation. And I think many people who have compared them and would prefer the Visuddhimagga approach to meditation, at any rate. During meditation, I often experience very blissful feeling and sometimes unspeakable sense of beauty. Do I use up my accumulated merit that way? No, you're making merit. What other commentary source would be reliable and trustworthy as Visuddhimagga? Well, the same sort of level of authority would be given to the Attakatas, the commentaries also by Buddhaghosa. And as far as I know, they haven't been entirely translated, but there are many translations of partial sections of the Attakatas that are available. And the Pali is readily available online. The Buddhist Publication Society has a number of short booklets of that have one sutta and together with the commentary, including the Satipatthana Sutta, the Brahmajala Sutta, etc. So if one wants to get a taste of the commentaries, you can go there. Also, Bhikkhu Bodhi has, just a few years ago, he translated the Sutta Nipata together with the commentaries. That's a very interesting work. Next, Nanagami is reborn successively higher pure abodes. If an Nanagami is already the highest pure abode after a lifetime of 16,000 kappas, has not attained arahantship due to lingering, Nanagami be reborn in the highest abode continuous existence. I don't know about that. I don't think it's ever stated authoritatively one way or the other on that one. I would have the preference to think that he would attain upon dying in his last lifetime to arahantship. I mean, if you can't get the work done in 16,000 kappas, it's Ajahn, my understanding is that one's acts throughout one's life impact when consciousness arrives after death. I struggle to understand how Mala became Arahant after a life of killing. The whole point of the story is that no one is beyond salvation. He became an Arahant during his life, so there's no way he could take a lower rebirth or any rebirth after becoming an Arahant. Have you read the commentaries from the Savastavadas, such as Abhidharma Kosha? I haven't read it entirely. I have to say I've read good part of it. I haven't worked all the way through it. Okay. The Abhidharma Kosha is also another uh, important source for early Buddhism. It's a major commentary tradition from the Sarvastivadins that was a contemporary school to the Theravadins. Okay, so it's a bit short this week, but I think that's okay. We'll come back uh, oh, uh, next week, and we'll talk about the the Visuddhimagga itself.